and welcome to another booktube video from me, Martha May Books, and today I have for you my reading statistics from 2020. Throughout 2020 I filled in a spreadsheet of my reading. I tracked a couple of different things on my spreadsheet. The thing that I was most interested in tracking was where I was sourcing my books from, because it was a goal of mine in 2020 to read more of my owned books rather than buying books in or getting books from the library, because I love the library, but I love the library too much, and pretty much every week I'm walking out there with 8 books. This is going to be a lot of numbers, and if you've watched any of my videos where I've tried to count books before, then you will know that I am bad at numbers, and so sorry about that. In fact, I'm so bad at numbers that I don't know how many books I read last year. My spreadsheet says 88 and Goodreads says 86, and I don't know who to believe. I've also redone my spreadsheet multiple times to using my Goodreads to see where I've gotten wrong, and I don't know. The first statistic that I tracked was my rating of books. In 2020 I rated 33 books 5 stars, 31 books 4 stars, 19 books 3 stars, 4 books 2 stars, and 1 book 1 star. I didn't realise they gave that many 2 stars out. I'm happy with my numbers. It's quite good that they go from the most amount of 5 stars. The next statistic is the one that I mentioned at the start of this video, and it is where I sourced my books from. I actually ended up adding another category into here because of how things turned out in 2020 and the fact that all the libraries closed. Because as I said at the start of this video, one of my goals for 2020 for my reading was to read less from the library so that I could read more of my owned TBR, and I ended up doing that mostly because the library shut for ages. I discovered that my library has an app in which you can download ebooks and audiobooks, and I definitely partook in using that app. So where I sourced from, I read 30 books from the e-library. I then read 10 books from the library, 27 from my backlist or owned TBR. I bought and read 14 books, so with that one I generally counted it if I bought it and read it within 2 months. That was when I counted it as bought and read, but there was a bit of variation in that, but that was generally the rule for that one, which actually surprised me that I'd read so many books. But I also counted my Mr. B's books for that one as well, and I have had 4 books from them, so I actually only bought 10 books. I reread 6 books and I borrowed 1 book, and borrowed is borrowed from a friend, not from the library. So I didn't do very well with my goal of reading less from the library and more from my owned TBR, because I read 40 books from the library. I read 27 from my owned TBR, and then I reread a couple and received 14. The next category that I tracked was the genres that I was reading from. I was interested to see the genres I was reading from, because generally I would say that I'm interested in gothic fiction and fantasy, adult fantasy, but we'll see what I read. So I read 1 adult contemporary book, which makes sense to me because adult contemporary is not a genre that I generally read from. I read 7 YA contemporaries, which is a shock to me because, as I said, adult contemporary isn't really a genre I read from. YA contemporary is not a genre that I generally read from either. I read 2 classics. I read 14 adult fantasies, which makes sense to me because I think it's a genre that I really like and read a lot from. I read 9 YA fantasies and then 17 children's fantasies, which is a lot. I read 9 historical fiction books. I read 4 horror books. I read 7 thrillers, which is odd for me because I generally say that thrillers isn't a genre that I read at all, so the fact that I read 7 of them, bizarre. I read 7 non-fiction books. I read 6 sci-fi books. I read 3 children's classics. Okay, so now we get on to kind of an odd one to track, but I was having fun making my spreadsheet at the start of the year and I decided to add it in. Which is books finished in each month. In January I read 7 books, in February I read 2 books, in March I read 10 books, in April I read 9 books, you can see lockdown started. In May I read 4 books, in June I read 5 books, in July I read 6 books, in August I read 8 books, and in September I read 6 books. In October I read 15 books, which, as I mentioned before, a lot of these were on audio, and the same with November, where I read 10 books. Some of those were also on audio while I was working, and also I got a new dog who loves walking, and so I also listen to audiobooks while I walk him because he's not very good at conversation. And in December I read 6 books. So those were all of the books that I logged on my spreadsheet, and now I'm going to go over to Goodreads to talk about some of the statistics that they decided to share with me. So as I said at the start of this video, Goodreads thinks I read 86, which is 2 books down from what I've got on my spreadsheet. So the shortest book that I read was 25 pages, and it was The Hope of Elantris by Brandon Sanderson, and the longest book I read was The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss, which was basically 1,000 pages. It's 994 pages. My average book length that I read is 359 pages. I don't really know what to say about that. I mean, that's kind of an average length of a book. So my most popular read was Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, and my least popular, or least read on Goodreads, was The Deep by Alex Rogers, which is a non-fiction about the ocean. My average rating for 2020 was 4 stars, which I'm happy with. It's definitely risen. I used to be around like 3.5, 3.2 previous years, and then it's been 4 stars this year. I don't know whether I am just getting better at choosing books that are going to be 5 stars, or whether I was just feeling generous this year. And there we are. There are all of my reading statistics. Thank you so much for watching my video. Goodbye.